Matthew 16:15. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am?
We're all children of God, but in what way do God's men actively strive to serve their Lord? At God's Men of Influence, we believe that when men are open to sharing their testimony, God's light shines into the darkness and sets loose His transforming power into our lives. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." Our mission is to create an environment where men can sharpen each other through the sharing of changed lives, and how through God's grace and mercy, we can become better husbands, better fathers, and better men in the service of His kingdom. Be blessed, be joyous, and be welcome here at God's Men of Influence.
Hey everybody, this is Dino with God's Men of Influence, and we are here with Jamie Looney today from San Diego, California. And, we have all these different men with all these different, we can call it problems, issues, blessings, whatever you want to call it, but they all have a story. And, we like to ccall it a testimony. Every man's testimony is different, but in so many ways, it's so much alike. And, I want all you guys out there that are listening right now, no matter what it is you've gone through, no matter what struggle you have right now or have had in the past, I got to tell you, you're not alone. There's other men out there that have had the exact same problem. I mean, whatever it is, go to our website. It's godsmenofinfluence.org, and you will see right there, you can plug into the search field. If you have a pornography issue, just type in porn. If you have marital issues, type in, marriage. If you're an athlete and you have performance issues, type in athlete. I mean, just type in whatever you want. I guarantee there's going to be a show that we've done that one of these guys has had a very similar issue to you, and in many times way worse. So godsmenofinfluence.org. It's right there also on Facebook, on Twitter. Just type it in. You'll find our information there. All right. So a lot of you guys that have been listening to the show know the format. Some of the new people, the basic format is I'm going to ask Jamie a series of questions with, starting with like who you are today. And then I'm going to ask him a series of questions going back to who he used to be. And then we're going to walk through his journey back to today again. Because that journey is really what we're all here to learn. And we call them nuggets here on the show. So Jamie's going to have a few nuggets, I guarantee it. And I'm going to hear some that are going to speak to me, and you're going to hear some that are going to speak to you. So just tune in and let's see what Jamie Looney is all about here. So Jamie, thank you.
Sure.
Welcome to the show.
No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to be exposed?
Sure. Being exposed is not a really comfortable place for me, but I'm up for the challenge.
Awesome. Well, let's start with, what is your favorite verse and why?
My favorite verse is Matthew 16:15. And that's when Jesus is asking the disciples, but what about you? Who do you say I am? And that really speaks to me about personal accountability, and that if you can't get past that question in your walk with Christ, you can't really move forward. And I think that's a question that a lot of people struggle with in the moment. Believers or non-believers asking across the table, whether you're at a restaurant, a bar, or at church, when they ask you, you're exposed at that moment. Your the next thing that you say, not only exposes to them where you stand with Christ, but to yourself. You have to, if you're honest with yourself.
Yeah, agreed. So, who are you today?
Who am I today? When you said that in the introduction, I started to sweat. Who am I today? I'd like to think of myself as a strong, optimistic man who has walked a number of different roads. I've faced a number of different things. I think I'm a good father today. I don't think I've always been one. I'm a good husband today. I strive to be kind and be thoughtful in my marriage. And I try and think things through without making snap decisions. But I think I'm a leader within my group of people that I'm surrounded by. But I'm also always looking to not be the smartest guy in the room. I'm always trying to find good mentors and people to follow. So,
yeah, and that's a great statement right there, because I kind of live by that too. We have so much to learn from others, and not being the smartest guy in the room, I guess just to break that down a little bit, right? You might be really smart in business. You might be really smart in academics, whatever it is, but there's somebody that's smarter in being a better husband, somebody that's smarter in being a better father. And what we could do is pick these people out and have them be our mentors and learn how to be better fathers, how to be better husbands. So it's a really great comment you made, and I hope all of you guys listened, because it's something that if you don't seek, sometimes you don't find.
Well, I talk about pursuing with intention, not to be a stalker, not to be a pest, but as we walk through life, we will, or I have stumbled across very influential men and women, and I have sought them out afterwards. I've tried to find common ground in the moment when I realized what these people had to offer, what their influence was on other people, how I would look at, wow, this is a founder of a business school, a very reputable business school, and I have access to him if I pursue him in the right way, if I choose to try and tap into that wisdom and that knowledge. But I have to do it with intent. I have to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we come across people in our lives and we don't act. We think, oh, that person won't find any interest in me. And instead, I've tried to reverse that. I've tried to see, how can I help? How can I get involved with that person, not from a taking, but from a giving?
Sure. So Jamie, what would you say your biggest weakness is as a Christian?
I was looking at that from the, I'm going to stumble over that a little bit. It's trusting completely. I think before my walk with Christ, I had some mentors in my life. My father, for one, that he was a strong man, but he also lived by the thought that if it needs to be done, he will do it, and he will do it on his own. And I've learned along the way that I can't do it alone. I can't do things on my own, and that what that requires is something that people that aren't walking with Christ, that they see it as a weakness, where you submit and you give over to what you can't control, and you have to trust and put your trust in something else. And I learned along the way to put my trust in God. I think a lot of things in my life led me to understanding how that worked. And I see a lot of people struggling that don't understand. Once you know how it works, how you can let go, how your worry and how your stress levels, your worry almost goes away. Your stress level goes way down.
What about on the flip side? What would you say your biggest strength is as a Christian?
My biggest strength, which sometimes comes back and bites me, is my ability and my willingness to love and to care and to help and to reach out. I run across the saying of no good deed goes unpunished, right? And time again, I look back at those moments. I say, yeah, but my heart was in the right place. I was trying to follow the direction of loving my neighbors and looking at my neighbors as people that are around me.
Have you always been like that, or is that after you found Christ?
I think that I've always had a little bit of that from my upbringing, my parents, my grandparents, there's a small group of people in my life that were very influential, and to this day, I think my brother even would agree. My dad was that guy that in the middle of the night, if someone called, whether it be family or a neighbor or a friend of a friend, if they had a problem, their car was broke down, their motorcycle was broke down, they knew they could call Mitan, and he would grumble a little bit, and he might be a little abrasive because it's 3:00 in the morning, but in the end, he was happy to do it, and he did it as a servant. He did it because he wanted to help, and I think I've always had that example by my father. But as I've gotten closer to Christ and good, strong Christian men, I've learned that works spiritually, that works physically, that works with people that we don't know, the people that are down and out. I think my greatest strength is loving unconditionally.
Awesome. So this next question is kind of like the question that I guess defines the rest of the show. It always goes down a certain direction. And the question is, have you ever had a dark time in your life? And by all means, if you've had more than one, go ahead. But feel free, just let it out here. This is where the exposed piece comes in.
Yeah. And as you asked that question, I leaning back in the chair, that's a tough one to, and I can hear the emotion in my voice as I even say it, that's a tough one for me to talk about.
And if it makes you feel any better, just so you know, I had a 6'6", 300-pound massive man full of tattoos cry in front of me when he talked about his.
Yeah, well, I've had a number of different challenges in my life. I think, dark. I'm sorry. I think the question is, have you ever had a dark moment?
And maybe it's a season.
Yeah. Well, there's been. I've learned. Trust me. You're listening to years of Al-Anon. Right, sitting here.
And for those of us that don't know what Al-Anon is, can you explain it?
Yeah, Al-Anon is very similar to AA but Al-Anon is for family members that are affected, where they have individuals in their lives that are either addicted to drugs or alcohol. So Al-Anon is the family version, because alcohol and drugs don't necessarily only affect the individual who's taking them. There are isms and things that come along with that affect the family members, and it affects the way that we think and the way that we make decisions and the way that we treat other people around us, because the disease of addiction just finds its way into our psyche, and it's a tornado, and it just destroys everything around it. So when you talk about a dark time, I want to just touch on quickly that I respect my father highly. He had his bouts with drugs and alcohol when I was young. He got sober when I was 18. I grew up on the Yakima Indian Reservation, where alcoholism is so prevalent. It's everywhere. And drugs were around when I was young, obviously, but and today it's really prevalent. Well, my life has been affected by the alcoholics and addicts around me, whether it was my father when I was young, to as a teen, the mother of my oldest son, who I care for dearly. She has had her struggles and has fought the good fight throughout her life. Her parents, were afflicted with alcoholism. And then and that's where it gets tough. Okay, I have to steel the nerves a little bit. So my oldest son,
How old is he?
he's 27. So, man, this is tough.
Yeah, let it out.
No, it's tough. So when I was considering the type of questions that you were going to ask, I had every expectation that you were going to ask a question like this. And I thought to myself, how am I going to answer the question of who, my family members, who are my family members, and how have they affected you? So my my oldest son is in prison. He's been there for about 7 years now. And thank God I had found a good, solid group of Christian men that had advised me before tragedy kind of struck, that while I was a strong man, I needed Christ in my life. And, so the question was, have you ever had a dark moment? I got out of the Marine Corps. I was a Marine for 11 years. I was in from 90 to 94, got out for 4 years, went back in 98.
98, was that after, when was 9/11?
No, 9/11 was after,
Okay.
right? 2011. In 1998, I came back in, went down to Camp Pendleton. I was with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, and I was in Okinawa when September 11th happened.
Okay.
I was in the sniper platoon. We were just doing a normal. We were with the 31st MEU. We were forward deployed in Okinawa. It was completely normal. And then when September 11th, when that happened, it was chaotic to say the least. But we ended up just getting on ships, went around Indonesia. We thought we were going to go and do some things right then, and we didn't. We actually rotated back, and then some things changed. But I was in the Marines for 11 years, and I had a dramatic life change. I came back. All that September 11th stuff happened. There was all kinds of deployments. I went to Afghanistan. I was in bed with the Afghan National Army, which was really cool duty. I came just prior to deploying. I got custody of my oldest son, Sebastian, and he was 14, and my wife Crystal and I. So I have 3 boys. Just to kind of bring the story around. I have Sebastian, who's 27, Christian, who's 26, and then I have Larson, who's 14. And Crystal and I have a mine, hers, and ours situation. So we were both married and divorced. We were both military. She was married to a sailor. We met when we were 20. So Sebastian, was born in so Sebastian was 2.5, I think. Christian was 11 months. And then obviously Larson didn't come along for a long time later. But so Sebastian's my oldest son. Christian is from Crystal's prior marriage. Anyway, rambling a little bit, but trying to get to, because there's pieces of this story that you have to know. Okay. Before I deployed, I had just gotten custody of Sebastian. He had come from Washington to come live with us. And I was in a non-deployable billet at that time, working on Camp Pendleton, and I got flagged for some special duty. And within 2 weeks, so I had custody of him for about 4 months, I think. And all of a sudden, I got orders to go to Afghanistan, and there was no working my way out of that, I had to go. And it was tough duty. We were living with Afghan troops on the Pakistani border, and we were kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And what that did was I kind of dropped my son off in Oceanside, California, with my wife, which was not his mother. And I think he had some resentment at that time, to say the least, that he was kind of pulled out of his environment in Washington, came to live down here, and boom, I was gone. And I think that kind of started a snowball effect in our lives as a family, because when I returned from Afghanistan, I had another life change, which was my EAS was coming up. I was the end of active service. I had some choices to make, whether I was going to re-enlist or I was going to get out. And I met a gentleman who influenced me strongly in my walk with Christ, Roger Grove. He had RJ Realty Investors. It was a commercial real estate company. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I met him at a dinner. He gave me a great opportunity, which was, hey, if you want to get out of the Marine Corps and come work for me, you can come work with me, and I'll teach you real estate. That should be easy for a guy like you. There's a lot more to that story, but what that did was not only did I come, not only did I deploy, but then I came back, and then we had this dramatic life change of now I'm around all the time. When I was active, it was training. I was gone a lot. Now I was around all the time, and that put my wife and I, Crystal and I, in a weird place, because all within a year's time, I was gone, back, and then I was around all the time, and
that's not always good for a marriage.
No. Looking back on it, I'm like, wow, what did you expect was going to happen? I was around with my kids. I had different expectations of everybody's day to day. Not only that, Crystal and I were, I was like, woohoo, life is different. I'm in commercial real estate. The market was booming at that time. I had all this newfound freedom. And so we were partying, and we were, and some of that, not some of that, all of that put my marriage in a tailspin. It was not good. And then my dad died. Then my dad died. Man, that was a tough one. There was so many things going on in my life from 2006 to 2008. And then, my dad died. We bought a house. There was all these different things going on. My wife and I, with our partying, got involved in a lot into life choices that are not healthy for marriages: infidelity, drugs, alcohol. Not so much on the drugs. I mean, today, so many people smoke pot and that kind of stuff, but just the idea that the direction that we were on, the trajectory, was not true.
Were you guys going to church yet at this point?
No.
Okay.
No.
And your boys are witnessing all this.
Oh yeah. I mean, we were gone all the time. I mean, we would, if I was off, because the habits that we had in the Marine Corps was when I would come home, I would want to go spend time with my wife. I'd want to go and do fun things, hang out with my friends. And,
sure.
Well, now I was home all the time, and I was working, and we'd go party, and so some infidelity going on, and bad choices that her and I were making, taxing that at the same time. My oldest son was running away from me. I was trying to shout him down at that time, coming out of the Marines, I knew the right way, and I was going to fix it, and I I would just get into rages.
And
right?
you can do it by just sheer strength and brute force.
Brute force and ignorance, you know.
And they have to listen to you, right?
Why wouldn't you? I was so smart, right?
Right.
I was so smart. Boy, look at my example, you know, and it was horrible. You know, there were moments where I was living in our brand new house. My wife was living upstairs. I was living downstairs. At that time, I don't even know where Sebastian was. He was living with a friend or something. He was probably 17. You know, and I was having issues with you know, I was right. All I knew is that I was right in these situations and everybody else was wrong. And I knew that I was making bad choices, but this all culminated. So working with Roger, he owned some property in Carlsbad, and North Coast Church out of Vista was looking for their first permanent satellite campus, and just by default, Roger said that, hey, we're gonna put North Coast Church in 25,000 feet of a 40,000 foot building. In the midst of leading up to that, in the midst of all that turmoil, this part that I kind of missed here is that when I was living downstairs and my wife was living upstairs in our house, I had gone to Roger and a couple of other men in my life, Rick Day, who owns Pacific Providence. He's a general contractor. They were strong Christian guys, you know, and I had gone to them because I think I was looking for someone to agree with me, and I told them how in shambles that my marriage was, and how I didn't think that things were going to work out, and I was just letting them know. And what I wasn't ready for was both of them said, you know, we understand, you know, I understand where you are. But you know, Roger had said to me, I know where you are, but why don't you, before you give up, why don't you let God work on your relationship? He's like, I know, you know, you're not going to church, you're not doing all that, but why don't you just try? Why don't you just come to church, listen to the message? And my wife had reached out to do the same thing, but she was talking with Mitzi, which was Roger's wife. And she had said, Crystal, just go to church and invite Jamie to come with you and see if God can help. Rick Day, I had talked to in the same way. He had said to me we were having coffee. I barely knew him. We had done some work together. But he's an older guy, strong Christian. And when I was telling him about it, you know, he just kind of shook his head and he said, you know, what I'd like to do, and I can see him. He's like, you know what? Because he knew that this wasn't what I expected. He said, you know what? I'd just like to pray for you right now. And I remember what was going through my head, and I was going, okay, I'm telling him that my marriage is falling apart, and this guy doesn't even know my wife, and he's going to pray for me, and that started something. You know, we had started. I had just before we start, I got selected to help build this church. I had started going, and I was listening. And our marriage was improving.
She was going as well.
Yeah. I think I know she was the instigator. Okay. She was the instigator. And I know that I had made a decision at one point that I didn't want to wake up in my house. I didn't want to wake up in a different place than where my children were. And we've talked, Crystal and I have talked about that. I think that motivation in that moment, you know, thank God for our children at that time. Larson was very young. He was only 3 or 4. And I remember just looking at him, just like before I'd left for Afghanistan, looking at him thinking, man, if I just never saw him again, how, because he was small, the other boys, but felt the same way. But just looking at how innocent he was that young. Yeah. And then thinking, if we get divorced, who are the boys going to live with? Yeah. And what a tragedy for them to, just out of the pot into the fire kind of thing. Just like, and all of our adult choices affecting all of their, affecting their lives in ways that they didn't get a choice. It was our choice.
It was our choice. So, somebody a long time ago told me, they didn't pick us, we picked them.
That's right.
And it's on us to not screw them up.
Yeah. I can remember, years ago, Dr. Laura used to be, I used to listen to AM radio all the time. And that, she used to just hammer on parents that were making decisions based on what was best for them, not even considering what was best for their children. And all that.
So bring it around for us.
Yeah, bringing it around. Obviously, I'm doing a lot of filler because there's parts of this that are tough. But I was led. I was guided by some men in my life, and then I was guided by them, and then I was led by the hand of Christ as I built that church, as I was the lead, I was the project manager. And as all of these people from North Coast Church came together to build this facility, in the midst of what I was doing, there was a moment, I've told people this, that I was standing in the middle of the sanctuary. It was still a construction zone, and there was no one there except Larson and I. It was late in the evening. I forget. We didn't have any. The budget was super small, so I was there doing something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it dawned on me. Wait, I'm building a church. How many people get an opportunity to fill that role as a project leader to build a place where so many people are going to come and be led to God? And so fast forward, there were contractors that were part of that project. There were vendors and tradesmen that were part of that project. They were all part of North Coast Church. And I was just led by the hand of Christ, truly, to the most amazing godly men during that process at a time in my life that I had, in a very short period of time, gone from, wow, look how awesome I am, coming out of the Marines right into commercial real estate, to being completely humbled by one of my children that was completely out of control, by my wife being out of control, by me just insisting that I knew how to get this all together, and just being completely humbled by the process and opportunity to build this church, being introduced to all the people that I met. And then from there to have my oldest son downward spiral into heroin addiction, and then ultimately he shot his dealer, killed him. That was on Christmas Eve. We were in Minnesota. We drove to Minnesota. My wife, my second oldest son, Christian, and Larson, we drove in our Volkswagen Jetta to where Crystal's family lives, and I get a phone call. And that phone call is, I think Sebastian's been arrested, and he's in jail, and he's being accused of murder. And as a parent, you don't plan for that in your life. I've told people this so many times. You You think about what are your kids going to when they start to drive? Are they going to call late at night? I've been in a car accident, right? You think about that. You think, Dad, I got pulled over. I was drinking. You worry about that stuff when they're out. You don't think, how do I react on Christmas Eve, surrounded by family that you don't know that well in another state, when your son is in another state, arrested and accused of committing a crime like that?
Let me ask you this. Based on the timelines you give me, I think he's about 20 years old at this point.
He's 20, yeah.
And does he have a girlfriend or anything like that?
He did.
And so were both the other boys with you guys in Minnesota?
They were, yeah.
So he's all alone on over the holidays, over Christmas.
Well, he was in Washington State, where.
So he had gone back up.
He had gone back up. Actually, we had invested in a treatment program up there. It's where my father actually got sober, and remember my father had passed away. I didn't have the money for it. Sebastian was down here in California with me, and we had gotten to the point where I had to give him the worst ultimatum that a parent ever can. And again, learning from my brothers in Al-Anon, there comes a point in a family where you have to choose: do you save the rest of the family, or do you let the addict destroy it all? Mm-hmm. And I don't put all of our problems at that time on my son, but that was a big point of contention, that he would come and go, and there was at one point where he just looked like death. He would be gone. He would call. I would go and pick him up.
Up until that point, had he shown any signs of violent behavior?
No. That's the horrible thing of it is, no, he just was out of control, and the addictions had him, and he would not tell the truth, and we knew it. And what that did was there was always this unspoken tension where Crystal and I couldn't communicate about him, because I'd get so angry, and in turn she felt helpless, and so her and I would run away from each other in a sense. I would try and reel him in, and he would agree, and then just turn around and do whatever he thought best. But there was a moment where I had to tell him, look, you can't come back here anymore. You pack a bag and you have to go. You just can't be here anymore.
Were his other brothers, his other older brother, or the second, was he involved, Christian, in any kind of drugs or anything?
No, but he was certainly affected by the situation because of the closeness of their age.
Sure.
He was drawn and torn between loyalties to his brother and then not knowing what to do.
And had you guys as a family already started doing the church thing at that point, or was it all kind of in transition around the same time?
No, at that time, that was going into 2009, 2010. No, we were well ingrained in a church, with our church at that time. Thank God.
Yeah.
That, because my first phone call after I had gotten the word was to a trusted friend in the church that was in my growth group. North Coast Church they call them growth groups.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know what I was I needed to call somebody.
Sure.
Here I am. My wife's family is in the other room. It's Christmas Eve. And I'm trying to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing right now?
Sure.
I'm halfway across the country in, 4-foot deep snow. And my son is in need of me.
What did you do?
First I was angry.
Did you believe it?
It wasn't outside of my ability to believe that he was involved. Because at that point in his life, I had reduced my expectations down to, really what I had prayed for the longest time, and it gets back to some of my story, is I had prayed, I had reduced my expectations down so low that when I would go to Washington, what I would do is I would just want to see him. That's what I would tell myself. I just want to see him. Just want to be able to have lunch with him and just see him. Don't ask about where he is with his addictions. Don't ask him what he's doing with his job. Just see him. Be in his presence, to let him know that I loved him and I cared about him. But in those moments, I was always wondering, am I going to get a call? Is he going to be dead?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So you think about that. But you don't think about, well, what if he hurts somebody else? How are you supposed to react to that? So what did I do? I got angry at first. It was like, see, I knew this was going to happen eventually, something bad, and you know what? He can just, but the more that I said that, the more that I said, no, Jamie, you got this wrong. Damn. I knew my son needed me. No matter where he was in his life, I knew that he needed his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I knew that I only had about 48 hours to get there for the arraignment, because I had talked to some people, and that was what was going to happen. He's going to get arraigned, and I needed to be there in my mind. I needed to be there. So when he, I didn't know what the circumstances were. I didn't know anything. All I had was this one phone call.
Yeah.
And so I got Christian. I told my wife, I said, I've got to go. And so Christian jumped in the car with me, and we drove straight through from Minnesota through the north.
Wow.
Against road closures. I wanted to be there for the arraignment. And what's crazy in all of this is when my dad passed away, it was the day before Christmas also. Oh, wow. So it was kind of some of that, like, oh my gosh, Christmas is, but in that we've learned, you can't let these moments define you. They're definitive moments, but you can't let them define you. But I got there and I did what I needed to do, which was be there for him. And in that moment, I've never, from being in a blizzard in the middle of Afghanistan, with trucks stuck in the mud, fog all around you, looking at your lieutenant and saying, "Sir, we're probably going to die out here and nobody's going to know," and he's like, "Yeah, probably," feeling helpless in that moment, right? I've never been more alone and more helpless than watching the court system take charge of my son's decision making. That moment, that in that moment, I was humbled beyond beyond anything that I can describe, because a long list of bad choices that my son had made resulted in me having absolutely no control. And in that, I had to learn to turn it over. And in those moments, I turned to Christ and said, and I still pray this way, is I asked him to come alongside me and sit there with me and give me the strength and wisdom to say the right things to my son, to talk to the attorney, to say the right things if and when there was an opportunity, to the judge, to anyone, to try and help influence the moment. But I knew that there was very little that I could do then. And I used to, when I was talking about reducing my expectations, I used to pray that God would bring him back to me as a whole person. That was my simple prayer. Bring my son back to me when he was in the clutches of addiction. And Pastor Chris Brown told me this shortly after, because through the trial, through Sebastian's incarceration, we became close. We began to be able to communicate. And I said this to Chris. I said, Chris, God answered my prayer because Sebastian was going to either it was going to end poorly with the addictions. It was going to end poorly, and God chose him not to die. Right? Heroin is a killer. Yeah. You don't hear of any old heroin addicts. But God brought him back to me. I just didn't pray specific enough.
You could have done a better job.
I could have said, "Bring him back to me," and not have this wall between us. But I can say that we are very close.
So let me ask you this: how long is his sentence for?
So his sentence is for 17 years. Of that, he's done 7. I don't think about, and I don't, if anyone asks me today, I can tell you, and that's why I struggle with exactly when it all happened and all that is, another thing another philosophy that I read is the Stoics, and the Stoics talk about focusing on things that you can control and things that you can't. Right? Figure out which ones you can. Just focus on that and trust the rest. Right? Yeah. And in the Stoics, they say that their philosophy was the closest thing to early Christianity, but not getting off on a tangent. But there's one thing that's helped me do is I don't really, like, when you ask me how old are you, I'm not sure if that was on the tape or not, but yeah, I'm 45. I don't think about that a lot. How long is Sebastian going to be? I don't know. But part of my day isn't taken up with the despair of how long he's going to be away. I don't think about that, honestly. Like, I don't. It's not a avoid. No, it's because it's not healthy. It's not 10 years, 9. I don't know.
Have you been able to bring the Lord to him through that wall?
So that's a tough one. Early on, and actually in my Bible, I carry a note that I wrote to him during the trial that the bailiff was nice enough to hand to him and then hand back. And I tell people, this is the only thing that I have that since that happened, it's the only thing that I have that he and I have both, had. I go up and visit when I can. I need to get up there again. But I'm sorry, what was that last question? I just
have you
passed right over.
Have you been able to
bring the Lord to Him? Yeah. That's where I was going with that. In his early when he was first arrested, he turned to Christ. He turned to God. I remember he recommended to me the book More Than a Carpenter at that time. So I know that he was getting good counsel.
Because there's definitely a community within the walls that, I've interviewed a couple of pastors that's where they minister. They go there, they baptize. He said, we baptize in trash cans. We baptize in whatever we can.
Yeah. He and I talk about God. We talk about, I talk to him about my walk. There's a large Native American community up there. He is a quarter Yakima and Klamath Indian. His mom is half Indian or half Native American. And he's really embraced that. And as I tell all of my friends, I am thankful that he has a strong community of men that he is surrounded with, that I have to believe are good. That his walk is his walk right now. Yeah. And again, I've learned that my walk is mine and mine alone, and that I do my best ministering, right? I do my best outreach when I focus on who I am within my actions. What I control is my message, and what people around me do with it, even my own son, is their choice. So I speak into his life as best as I can without expectation. Yep. Because the expectation is the part that is unhealthy for me.
Let me ask you this. You've answered most of all my questions here just within your own story. But is there any advice you could give to other men right now that might be going through something similar to what you went through? And maybe it doesn't mean that, your child has committed murder, but maybe they're spiraling out of control, or maybe you've made some mistakes that have affected your children. So speaking to those men, right, that are having issues with their children right now, what kind of advice would you give them?
It's the same advice that I give my friends and people that are just struggling with where their life is, because our children, while our children have it cuts deep when our children are out of control, or it cuts deep when our children aren't going the way that we expect them to. And I would say that through my experiences, 9 out of 10 times it's the example that they've witnessed. It's the example that we've set. The expectations that we've spoken in, that we've put on them or on ourselves. Everyone's got their own life to live in their own timing. God's timing is not necessarily our timing, and living a good life, living in a way that is successful, and I'm doing air quotes, is all relative. It's all defined by what, whose opinion. And so when our children are not necessarily going in the direction that we have envisioned or we had hoped, I think kind of realigning and reconnecting with the Word, and knowing that we just need to accept them. We need to allow them to be who they are and support them and talk to them about making good choices. But we have to take away some of our expectations in those moments and then focus inward on who we are. What virtues are we demonstrating? How humble are we being? How patient are we being? Are we demonstrating courage and perseverance? Are we demonstrating those things to them in a positive way, without being critical? It's not a touchy-feely thing. I mean, I was a Marine, and I'm always being instructed by my wife that my delivery comes across very sharp and very quick to.
It's because you've been taught you don't have time to.
Yeah. Well,
I've got to get to the point.
I get to the point, and in this conversation has been.
That's also man talk. Oftentimes, I'm the same way. My wife gets mad because she thinks I'm rude at times or abrupt in the way I say things. But I think that's just how men communicate.
Yeah.
I'm going to add something to everything you said. One of the earlier podcasts that I had done with a guy named Tom Bonds, he made a comment that really resonated with me, and I haven't been able to forget it. And what he said was, as a husband, as a father, as a man, every decision we make is generational. And I can't forget that comment, because every time I think about it, when it's time for me to make a big decision, the common way to make the decision is how will it affect my life? Mm-hmm. But as a husband, if I don't think how it'll affect my wife's life, or as a father, how it'll affect my kid's life, and quite honestly, generations, right? It's generational. So if we raise our kids in a way, they're going to probably raise their kids in a way. And if we make these decisions without thinking about them, then it's really, truly just a selfish decision, because we made it based on how it's going to affect my life. And although I don't always do it, I try to always remember that. And when I do make a decision, I want to try and think about the generations to come as the patriarch of the family.
Certainly.
And that's one of the things, if I could just impress upon everybody listening as men, think about that. Don't make decisions based on what's going to happen in your life and how it's going to affect you and your momentary happiness.
I'm with you 100% in that. I have a micro, example of that going on in my household today, in that Larson, at 14, has grown up stable. The decisions that I've made with my career have kept him in the same school district his entire life. It's the first person in my immediate family that's ever done that. Right? Crystal, I think, went to 18 different schools. Wow. I started in California, ended up on the reservation. At 18, left for the Marine Corps. But different. Christian was on Camp Pendleton, then off Camp Pendleton, and then in the Carlsbad School District. So he bounced from Oceanside to Carlsbad. Larson was in the Vista School District his entire life, and since 2007, he's been involved with North Coast Church.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. He's in Fuel right now. It's a teen program, or high school program. He was in TNL, which was a junior high program, and good, solid activities with good, solid mentorship. Not just by me, but by the leaders that he's surrounded with, and I see the differences in his choices in our home. I see he says things or makes decisions. He's still a teenager, goodness sakes. But I see some of the things that he chooses to do, and the things that he wants to do, the aspirations that he has, and I think, okay, what am I demonstrating about family? What am I demonstrating about commitment to things? And I wasn't a good dad. I was a loving father when I was young, but I was a dad at 18 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was I think I was a lot more wise once Larson was born.
Well, listen, we need to wrap this up, but before we do, is there, just lastly, as I always ask everybody, is there a book that you could recommend that you think other men should be reading?
Yes, and I think a lot of what we just talked about, I was thinking about this. I thought you might have this question, and an author that I've been really impressed with and I've turned to over and over again, his books that I have of his are just all full of notes and things, is The Obstacle is the Way from Ryan Holiday. It's based on Stoic principles that I mentioned earlier. And there's a quote actually from it that I brought, and it's from Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
Okay. And this quote is in the beginning of the book, and it really sets the tone for just everything that I believe is important in my life, and I try and share this with other men. Is the quote is, "Our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our intentions or our dispositions." And from that, the obstacle becomes the way, and that's the whole heart of what Ryan Holiday is writing about. Is we can still be good, strong, optimistic, positive men. Our dispositions don't need to be impeded. They shouldn't be when we're facing adversity. Yeah. In fact, it should make us. We should be more inspired by the challenge, that this obstacle that we're facing, we can challenge it with a joyous heart. The obstacles that come at us, we don't know when they're going to come. But we can be sick and still be happy, right?
Yep.
We can still bring joy to the people around us. Just because we're sick doesn't mean we have to be mean. Just because our career isn't going the way that we want it to go doesn't mean that we need to be glum, right? We can still be honest. We can still be creative. We can still be energetic while we face these challenges. And I think that's what Marcus Aurelius was talking about way back then, and it was just as applicable then as it is today. And I think the word of Christ is the same.
So give the book name one more time.
It's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Cool. So guys, we're going to have that on our website. It's godsmenofinfluence.org. We're also going to have some of the show notes from Jamie's podcast here. And Jamie, if it's okay with you, if other men that might be going through something similar to you need to reach out, oftentimes, they're too embarrassed to or whatever, but, we want to try and keep an open dialogue of communication here with people and let you know that we are here for you, and that even as a strong, mighty man, it is okay to reach out. Are you open to giving your email address so somebody can reach out? Certainly.
They can. You guys can reach me at jamielooney@gmail.com. That's my personal email. So JAMIELOONEY@gmail.com.
Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate the openness, and I hate saying it because I know you're a tough Marine, but even the tears.
No, and I appreciate the opportunity. I've never really talked about this, and to do it in this forum, I think is healthy.
Yeah.
I've had some second thoughts on how others might view it. I'm an open book. Anybody that asks me about my family, I let them know that it's okay to talk about. It's good to talk about this kind of stuff.
It is. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. Again, godsmenofinfluence.org. If you're on Facebook, just type in God's Men of Influence. You'll see our it's a cross logo. That's us. I'm sure there's other names similar, but that's ours. And same with Twitter. We're right there. Reach out, comment, like, share. And also, if you can, go to iTunes and Stitcher and all the other podcast platforms, and make sure you comment there and leave us a 5-star review so you can help share what we do and spread the word. Remember, be blessed, be joyous, and always be welcomed at God's Men of Influence. We'll see you next time.